Cities are a defining feature in the global economy and a hub of activity that are constantly changing and adapting. In this lecture, we will examine urban structures both in the United States and around the world. This topic is important to geography because of the ways in which cities and urban settlements are formed, where they form, how they grow, and why. There are three important processes that affect the structure of cities, which are centralization, decentralization, and agglomeration. Centralization refers to the forces that draw people and businesses into the downtown or central city. Decentralization, or also called suburbanization, draws people and businesses out of the center city, often into the suburbs. Agglomeration is a term used to describe the clustering of like businesses together, or, in some cases, the unlike businesses together in a central city or even suburbs. Cities use functional zonation to divide the city into smaller areas of land use, such as residential, commercial, or industrial. How an area is defined zonally has an impact on its value. The most desirable areas have the highest values and therefore cost more to buy or rent. As the bid-rent curve shows in the image on the right, as you move away from the highest cost districts such as the central business district, the value and cost of land goes down. The graph on the left hints at the complexity of urban land values and shows that suburban locations that are highly accessible tend to be associated with higher land values as well. Sometimes institutional forces have a major impact on urban land use patterns. Governments can use zoning to alter market forces of land costs. Zoning are laws that regulate land use and development in a jurisdiction. Urban geographers have developed models to describe cities' internal structures. The photos show two such models, the concentric zone model and the sector model. The concentric zone model, developed by Ernest Burgess, was based on a study of Chicago's development along Lake Michigan. In this pattern, obviously cut in half, urban land uses were neatly organized in rings around a highly focused central business district that contained much of the city's retailing and office functions. Residential districts beyond the CBD were added as the city expanded, with higher income groups seeking more desirable locations on the outside edge of the urbanized area. Hoyt's sector model placed greater emphasis on the role of transportation in that the development of industrial sectors, which follow rail or river routes, for example, but high-income residential sectors also tend to grow in proximity to the fastest transportation routes as well. Filtering occurs as the well-to-do move into new homes and their vacated homes become available or filter down to the middle-income households. Middle-income homes also filter down to low-income households. Two more models include the multiple nuclei model and the urban realms model. In the multiple nuclei model, as shown in the bottom right photo, states that a city can have multiple cores or nuclei rather than a single CBD. Depending on the city, a core could be, besides retail, a harbor area, a government district, university, and/or manufacturing center. These multiple nuclei would influence the patterns of land use in the city. The urban realms model, shown in the photo on the left, was based on San Francisco, where the suburbs had become self-sufficient centers. Each suburb was a new urban realm with its own downtown or commercial center. These cities are often referred to as edge cities. The photo at the top is of Tyson's Corner, often described as an edge city. An edge city is a suburban cluster with office, retail, and entertainment and residential space that are often located at major highway interchanges. This diagram shows how changes in transportation influenced urban form over the years. In 1970, geographer John Adams related stages in the development of transportation to changes in the residential structures of cities. Although he concentrated on the Midwest, his stages are broadly applicable to other parts of the country. Because of changes in city shape since 1970, urban geographers have added a fifth stage. There are no questions to answer, but please pause the video and study the diagram. Outside North America, cities have developed quite differently. For instance, European cities, especially in Western Europe, maintained historical elements as well as newer industrial zones. The cities began with the medieval period, then were modified during the Renaissance, and added on to during the industrial era. Today, most Western European cities contain all three elements. In Eastern Europe, especially during the Soviet era, cities took on quite a different picture. They still contain the elements of the medieval period, but after World War II, they became socialist cities with large residential housing estates that sometimes housed up to 100,000 residents. The photo shows apartment blocks on the outskirts of Tallinn, Estonia, which stands in contrast to the city's medieval skyline. They illustrate the attributes of socialist cities were sometimes grafted onto pre-existing cities. Colonial cities were cities built during the colonial period on colonial soil. Depending on the colonizing power, these cities functioned as administrative, economic, and/or military centers. In some cases, colonial cities were built near or even grafted onto an existing indigenous city or urban settlements. In other cases, entirely new cities were built. Most of these cities were also segregated between the indigenous people and the colonizing powers. Former colony cities are changing under pressures of urban growth and globalization. They are sometimes referred to as hybrid cities, which exhibit a mixture of indigenous, colonial, and globalizing influences. A good example is Accra, the capital and largest city in Ghana. In Accra, the city contains three distinct central business districts: local, national, and global, with each one having a different objective. The local district includes indigenous markets and small-scale retailing that serves local clientele. The national district corresponds to the CBD established during colonization and includes a mix of domestic and foreign firms as well as government functions. Lastly, the global district is centered usually around major transportation nodes, such as an airport, and caters to the multinational corporations and retail for the elite. Lastly, Islamic cities, largely similar to European cities, also have a religious overtone, most notably a religious center, a central marketplace, and residential quarters based on ethnicity or occupation. Some of the religious influences included orientation towards Mecca and increasing privacy and private spaces, such as the absence of street-level windows, L-shaped entryways, and exterior doors that do not face each other. Please pause the video and answer the following. The earlier models of cities were concentric zone, the sector, and the multi-nuclei. Compare those to the more recent urban realms model. In addition, what seems to be the driving factor with that change? In your own words, using the text as a guide, be thorough and specific with your answer.